Hi, welcome back. I am Pastor Bucky Beach from Good Shepherd Lutheran Church and Lutheran Campus Ministry in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. We are back inside for this 8th Sunday after Pentecost sermon. If you grew up in eastern South Dakota between the years of 1955 and 1996, you probably remember a TV show that was on after school. In its early days, the show started with a sky blue background and a jet plane circling the words on the screen, Captain 11, that twinkled with stars. And suddenly this jet plane came to a halt right in the middle of the screen, and it hovered there staring right at you through the camera. And a voice came on saying, "One man in each century is given the power to control time. The man chosen to receive this power is carefully selected. He must be kind. He must be fair. He must be brave. You have fulfilled these requirements, and we of the outer galaxy designate to you the wisdom of Solomon and the strength of Atlas. You are Captain 11. And then, suddenly, Captain 11 appeared on the screen in a yellow-trimmed blue pilot uniform with a huge Midwestern smile on his face as he saluted everyone out there in Kellerland and welcomed his crew for the day. The crew were the lucky kids that came for miles around to be on the show. And if it was your birthday, man, you were named, you were recognized on TV. I saw my cousins there one time, and boy, I was really jealous. The commercials and the sponsors, especially in the early days, presented some of the wisdom of the day about our little friends, the honeybees, from the Southern States Beekeepers Federation, or how healthy a good bowl of breakfast cereal was for you, like Honey Crunch Wheat and Raisins, or Tony the Tiger Frosted Flakes that will bring out the tiger in you. But my favorites were the three little Rice Krispie guys who sang Snap, Crackle, Pop, Rice Krispies, and Cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs Bird, all, of course, followed by announcements about what was going on in Kellerland in eastern South Dakota. There were cartoons, and children were invited to jump around on camera and wave one hand, and then both hands, and then both hands and one foot, and then both hands and both feet. And all this was happening for an entire half hour from 4 o'clock to 4:30, while our moms, of course, cooked dinner, and we waited for our dads to come home from work. As a TV news anchor described it in 1996 after the show finally went off the air, he said, it was perfect for the time. Well, everybody at least knew Captain 11, who was really Sioux Falls weatherman Dave Dedrick. So, Dave, wherever you are in that great golf course in the sky, may you be at peace. One man in each century is designated with the wisdom of Solomon. It'd be nice to have some of that right now. Is it like not here? Can't we have it? Or are we just tone deaf to what has always been evident and still is evident today? But just what is the wisdom of Solomon? It's actually a book called The Wisdom of Solomon, or the Book of Wisdom. It's a Jewish text. It was composed in Greek. It was created in Egypt. It's very cosmopolitan, It's dated to the late 1st century BCE, the primary subject being, yeah, you guessed it, wisdom. But wisdom is defined as the achievement of knowledge, which is a gift from God showing itself in action. And this wisdom is with God from all eternity. Now, we get a glimpse of this wisdom in one of our readings today from the Wisdom of Solomon from an earlier time than the actual book itself, the 7th through the 6th century BCE, which is when 1st and 2nd Kings were written. It's a history of ancient Israel, from its inception to its destruction, and also the hope for its restoration. And of course, it includes the reasons why it fell from grace. Wisdom is knowledge about why bad things happen, but it's also knowledge about how to live in good ways. It would be kind of like someone 400 years from now chronicling what led to the destruction of our own country and laid out hope for the future by actually learning from the past. 1 Kings says this boy Solomon was chosen to lead following his father David's kingship. Solomon admits that, I quote, he doesn't know how to go in or to go out or to come in. And so he requests that God give him wisdom to govern, discerning between good and evil. God sees in this young boy an inherent wisdom from the beginning, because Solomon, when given a chance, did not request from God anything for himself. He didn't request long life or riches. His request had to do with what was best for others. How do I lead? How do I govern other people? Now, the actual book of wisdom deals with wealth. It deals with power and prayer. It appeals to God's people to love mercy and justice and righteousness, and to pursue compassion, not just for all, but especially for those who are most in need. It describes how one speaks and how one should not speak. If you put it in the context of Scripture as a whole, it describes how God always acts and expects us, especially those who lead, describes how they are to act. It states that the sinful think that everything is a chance and that they should just live each day and enjoy each day, but they're misled because God has a way that works for all. Wisdom is always action-oriented, and it's not knowledge that is disconnected from reality. Wisdom is contextual. As things change, the acts of wisdom that I mentioned before, compassion, righteousness, and mercy, governing with others in mind, they remain consistent. But how they are applied changes because times change and situations change. Therefore, it would be wise to understand the specifics of what worked in the past and why it worked, but we can't just do again what worked in the past. Churches are a good example of that. We can't just go back to the past, though it ought to be considered. The question is, what would work today? And we could ask from a negative perspective, what isn't working today? Wisdom suggests that if it's not working today, we confess that. And hopefully that leads to where hopefully our confession is led through an honest lamentation, leading then to action and change for the better. Now today's reading, that was the reading from 1 Kings. Today's reading in Matthew is full of parables. And they don't necessarily speak to the same theme, but each one has a wisdom. Like, for example, recognizing in the smallness of a mustard seed that which grows into something much larger. Or the hidden effect that yeast has on flour. Or discovering what lies hidden in a field that you value more than anything else. If we combine this wisdom of Solomon with the wisdom of Jesus' parables, and we look at a modern day parable or story, we might suddenly realize the importance of asking what would work today. based on what has not worked in the past. Let me give you an example. Athletic teams are being challenged to change mascots that are offensive to many, not to everyone, but to many, based on our awakening to the wisdom of knowing or learning our past and what needs to be changed for our present and our future. Now, besides Captain 11, something else from my past growing up in South Dakota suddenly hit me like a blunt instrument to the head. The team name of Huron College, a small university with a Presbyterian church origin in my hometown. And keep in mind that South Dakota has a very troubled history of relations with indigenous peoples. The team name was the Scalpers. The Huron College Scalpers. Now, not everyone would find that offensive. Not every white person and not every indigenous person would have the same understanding of that part of history. In fact, they would have a very different understanding of that history. They both actually might lay claim to the name for different reasons, or they might both reject it. Not every person with red skin, as Sitting Bull apparently described his own skin color as compared to the white-skinned people, not everyone finds it offensive. The name of the NFL team from Washington, the Redskins, to many represents a very troubled history that we are attempting to deal with and having a very hard time coming up with solutions that have to do with wisdom, like compassion and mercy and righteousness and justice for everyone. The name itself could be and is an identity that some indigenous people reject, while others find strength and solidarity in it. The owner of the team, Dan Snyder, said that he would never change the name. But now that the biggest sponsor of the team, FedEx, is applying pressure, spelled M-O-N-E-Y, he has agreed to change it. I don't know all of his reasons for not wanting to change it, but I do know that many assume it has to do with a racist attitude toward the people named. And maybe it is. But it becomes something different very quickly. It becomes white supremacy. If changing the name does not involve consulting with indigenous people. Not that they all speak as one, but were they brought into the conversation? Were they asked? Not just were they asked what the name could be in the future, but were they asked, for example, did the owner of the team, did the board members, did those in power ask indigenous people how they might be able to do something positive for indigenous people based on the needs and wants of the people from whom so much has been taken, including an identity and a home? What would happen if the name was retained as a sense of pride, like the phrase black power has been to black people, or like red power has been to indigenous people? Rather than just following a pattern of stealing or appropriating an image without giving anything back, as is the history and tradition of white people, what if, for example, what if the team and its owner were to give back or give respect to indigenous people by giving, say, a percentage of its profits to causes that benefit people with red skin? What if people in power were able to lament and confess what has happened in the past and repair, asking first for forgiveness and then meaning it in that ask? as evidence with action. Now, the Northern Great Lakes Synod of the ELCA, the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, of which we here are a part, the Northern Great Lakes Synod is preparing to deal with the doctrine of discovery, asking that we all learn about it, leading us to hopefully repudiate it. So like this 2x4 that keeps hitting me upside the head, my realization is that we in power, in this case the Northern Great Lakes Synod, don't get to call the shots in that discussion. We get to ask for forgiveness, if we mean it, and then ask what our future role should be in our relationship with indigenous people. What could it be? The whole situation is a parable that Jesus might have told. But discovering the wisdom of our future actions will take time. It will take work and conversation and acknowledgement of the past that leads through lament and confession, just like the season of Lent leads to the surprising awakening of Easter and a new world. We are in a very dark time. It is still Lent in our world. And we all know that Easter happened, and it's still happening. But Easter is not cheap grace. Easter is God's wisdom that calls for us to let go of what worked for us in the past, so that in our future actions, it works for all of us. Our proclamation is Christ is risen. The indeed part that everyone loves to follow with. The indeed part of it is the response that we get to make, not just with our voices, but with our actions, because we recognize that the gift of life and freedom and justice, all parts of God's wisdom, is God's gift for all. Thank you for joining me today.